Welcome to the Burg, a place full of refuge and fantasy. Orlando Bloom is a cop investigator, and Cara Delevingne is a beautiful fairy. Welcome, everyone, to Carnival Row.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
What's up, all you AfterBuzzers? Thank you so much for tuning in to the new first episode of the Carnival Row After Show. Woo! I'm your host, Veronica Valencia, and joining me today, he is a producer. He edits all the awesome short-form content you are probably seeing on all of our platforms, and a big fantasy nerd. Everyone, round of applause for Vito. Thank you for joining me.
Hello, thank you so much, V. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm super excited about it.
I'm super excited to have you.
Thank you.
I haven't had a partner in a long time, so I'm happy to talk to somebody.
I was about to say, I've seen a lot of your solo shows. I've seen a lot of those through the short-form content, but I'm happy to be here. Oh my God, Carnival Row!
Honestly, this show is so exciting.
Yeah.
I do other fantasy stuff here, and I'm so excited. And, we're going to get into the episode. We're going to talk all about I want to talk about the world and the world building, the themes that are going to be continuous throughout this season. We're also going to be doing some deep dives into the characters that we're introduced to this season, so Vignette and Philo. But before we get into any of that, and we also have some news and gossip, and we have a wonderful special segment that Vito is going to do, taking us on a little lesson down Mythical Row, introducing us to some of the great creatures that we are introduced to in this show. But before we get into any of that, Vito, I want to get your overall thoughts on essentially what's the pilot episode.
Absolutely. So when I dove into this, I came in with kind of lukewarm talk about it because it's getting a lot of critical reception, but honestly, I really enjoyed the immediate sense of world building that they gave. From that opening static shot on the statues that they gave that looked like a war memorial to like leading us right into this battle, or it's not really a battle, but the runaway that the fairies are having against what was left of the armies that were invading their lands. It was just immediately set me on the right track for this. It set me on such a look at this grungy, dark world filled with magic, which I love aesthetically. I love when people can mix magic and this kind of like darker vibe a little bit. But yeah, I loved the introduction of Cara's character of Vignette and leading into her relationship with Philo. We saw Orlando on that little plaque.
Yeah.
It's funny, I didn't even realize it was Orlando at first. And then when they did the like fade into his face, I was like, oh, that's why. Yeah, but I don't know. I think the world building has been great so far. I think that the aesthetic that they set up is so wonderful to look at, and the costuming and the music, everything just really threw me into this world. How about you?
Oh, I loved it from the beginning. I'll be perfectly honest. My I like fantasy, and so I was like, Orlando Bloom, Cara Delevingne, I should give this a try. But also, I think recently kind of the thing that pushed me to watch this show as quickly as I did was I wanted to give more love to Amazon Prime shows.
Yeah.
I've been getting into a few of them recently. I'll not go too deep into that, but I was like, Amazon Prime has been doing some really great shows, so I want to see kind of how they tackle, fantasy. And kind of going off of what you're saying, actually, I love, how you brought up world building. I think we should go into that first.
Absolutely.
Because I, too, love this type of world that they built. I've watched so much fantasy where it's very Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, kind of this whole land kind of thing of nature, and then there's fantasy that takes place in like New York City and all this stuff. But I love how, like you were saying, this world is grungy. It's kind of like Victorian era.
Yeah, like steampunk.
It almost seems like out of place in a sense, but I love it.
Absolutely. And like the addition, what really threw me off at very first, I did not expect guns right off at the top, but they like really threw you into like World War I steampunk. They've got guns, they've got all the aesthetic with the gas masks, they've got the dogs, and I found that really interesting that they introduced that up top, and then we started seeing the architecture that was very like Victorian-esque. We got to see like the like bowler hats and the top hats and everything, and I was really surprised because it really reminded me of a graphic novel, the way that they set this up. And I know that I'm pretty sure that they have a graphic novel that they set alongside this, like a comic series that they produced, but just the cinematography that they had, just every frame looked to me like it was a frame in a graphic novel, and it reminded me so much of a lot of the aesthetics of recent art that people are trying to do with that, especially with like the Lovecraftian vibe that they have that I'll talk about later in Mythical Row.
I was gonna say I also have some Lovecraftian ideas for the very end of this episode. We will get to that.
Absolutely.
So I kind of want to dive into Vignette because you know, as you were saying, it opens right out of the gate, and we see her basically being a complete warrior. Right?
I love her.
Yeah, she's oh my gosh, she's great.
I just like the immediate sense of how much she's been through how she handles that dog. I'm just gonna call it a dog for lack of a better word with it.
I was gonna say I think it's a wolf. They call it the Pact, and
the Pact.
I'm assuming it's a wolf.
Yeah. Oh, isn't the Pact the reference to like? Isn't that the group that spawned
like
out?
yeah.
So like the Pact dog, whatever. The way that she handles that, just in comparison to all the other women, which we also find out later why that was all happening. But like, she just took out that dog immediately. Like, she took out that dog like it was no problem at all, and it was so obvious that she's seen a lot of battles, she's seen a lot of war, she's seen a lot of scary things, and she's handled herself so easily. I loved the way that they introduced her character because it didn't even require her really talking at all. You just got this immediate sense of, yes, I am so for her. She's protecting her own kind. She's really like, she's going against whatever's happening here. And yeah, I don't know. I loved her. And I thought Cara Delevingne did a great job so far. Even just in this first episode, I honestly like really fell in love with the character. How about you?
Oh, I loved her too. I thought that she came, you know, right out of the gate, you know, like, this is my character. She's going to be fierce. She's going to protect her own. She's going to do what she needs to get the job done kind of thing. And speaking of getting the job done, I kind of want to go into kind of talking about the decisions that she's making. So to jump a little bit ahead, we see, you know, the ship sinks, which I want to give a shout out to everyone who is joining us in the chat, by the way.
Hello,
do you know we
chat.
have a live chat?
No, I didn't know that we have actually, yes, I do
you
know.
Do,
I
you
just
should
didn't
know
have
that.
it pulled up.
I want to give a shout out
right
to Billie Jean Girl 24 in the chat.
Thank you, Billie Jean.
Carlito, I hope that's how I pronounce your name, is saying great show, and then Billie Jean is saying the ship getting destroyed and everyone drowned was sad.
Oh my god, it was so sad.
And then ER's grandpa is saying, yeah, that total ship destruction caught me by surprise. They ain't playing. No, they're not.
Absolutely not. I was so surprised that like when I saw the whole breach, I thought there was some chance that they would be able to save it. Like maybe she would find some way, but as soon as the second hole just opens up and it's just whoosh, then I'm like,
it's what's gonna happen already.
Oh my god.
And so after we flash forward, you know, she basically has to become a servant in order to pay off her debt. But what I kind of want to talk to you about is the decision kind of she made to basically live this life. So she's talking with Tourmaline, her friend who she meets up in Carnival Row, and she's talking about kind of, you know, how she had a job to basically bring people to Carnival Row. So it's like they're immigrants. They're essentially leaving this place of, you know, terror and chaos and danger to go somewhere of refuge, but of course they're going to a place where they're not necessarily welcome. And so what I kind of wanted to get your opinion on was, why do you think Vignette herself never just came over to the Berg like Tourmaline did and just kind of established, like, why do you think she chose this kind of almost savior complex in a way to bring all these people?
I mean, we all want to be heroes, you know. I think that might have something to do with it, but I also think she just, like, judging by her the understanding that you get of her experience in war, I think she just knows how much she can handle, and it's so obvious compared to the other fairies that we're introduced to off the bat that they just are pretty much defenseless, at least on this island. The remainder of what's happening between the Pact and them, they just get mowed down. They get killed so easily. And it seems like she's the only one that really was able to defend herself in any regard. So she might have a sense of like duty about it that I think probably comes to anybody that like would fight for their people. But maybe the decision was almost selfish in a way, because she knew she was putting herself into danger and she feels as though she's the only one that can do it. But I don't know. I wonder what would have happened if in that instance she died during that battle, would it have felt like something that was worth it to her? I think so.
I know, I agree with you completely. I kind of agree with what you were saying too, is that maybe just her in her own character, you know, because this episode did open up with basically a little backstory of the war.
Yeah.
And then it opens up with her. So we kind of put 2 and 2 together. Oh, she was probably part of that, you know?
7 years ago.
7 years ago. But she probably, you know, like you're saying, does see that she has the experience to survive, this experience to help. She probably knows the land better than everyone because it seems like she's been doing this for a while.
Definitely.
So, no, I agree. I would definitely say that she probably has this... she wants to be the hero. She wants to be able to help her own kind more that than anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. Her character, just like the empathy that comes from her character also right off the top is just incredible. I mean, she's kind of a cold character, and we can see that in the interaction on the boat and then kind of the interactions thereafter, not to jump too far ahead, but to like see her interacting with the police in the Berg and then also showing her interacting with the head of the ship. It's just obvious that she's very transactional in a lot of things that happen between humans, at least. I find it interesting that we don't really see a lot of interactions between her and fairies in this first episode, and like the one that she does, she's getting thanked on the boat for doing all of this, and she's like, no, don't thank me. And I just find that so interesting because it's like, look, just take the thanks, I guess. Yeah. Like, you don't need to be like broody, but I guess in this world you do have to be.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, bringing up broody and like even what you were saying about how her actions are very transactional and how she interacts with people in the Berg, it's probably because of the way that they are treated.
Definitely.
But you know who doesn't treat them that way?
Philo.
Orlando Bloom.
Philo, our good boy.
Our good boy Philo. Let's get into his character and his introduction a little bit.
So doom and gloom. Oh my gosh.
I mean, I think he's less doom and gloom than Vignette.
Definitely.
In a sense. But initial reactions on Philo.
Edgy. He's so edgy, but I live for it. I honestly, like, when that fade happened, when the crossfade happened between his picture and him sitting in the train, I was like, oh, this is a man that is, like, serious. This is a man that I'm not going to get any jokes from, but I don't necessarily need that. He, like, the interactions that he first has with the 2 cops that are standing in the street that are mistreating the one Puck, I just like I almost didn't expect him to go as deep into that as he did, because he just immediately like he knocks that dude right off his feet right onto the ground, and it's exactly what I wanted.
I love how both Vignette and Philo are basically introduced as characters no one wants to mess with.
Oh, they're badasses.
And that you shouldn't mess with them.
I love it so much.
But, you know, from the beginning, you know, he is introduced as someone who is sympathetic towards.
Absolutely.
Not just Faye, but kind of Critch kind in general. Critch, I guess, being the derogatory word used for creatures in this show.
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about a lot about that and how I wanted to talk about it, because they definitely have a lot of derogatory terms for all of the Fae folk. Maybe we should just say Fae folk? I don't know.
I mean, they wouldn't say Fae folk, but I'm excited to maybe hear about this in Mythical Row, if Puck is even the correct term, because it's said by so many people that do discriminate towards Pucks. I guess we'll have to wait and
find out.
See. But basically, Philo is here at Carnival Row because he is investigating a string of attacks.
Yes, a string of murders of innocent Fae folk, which we find out. And a side note, kind of going to your point earlier, I found it so interesting how he obviously knew so many of these people. Like, as opposed to the cops that were introduced, they like just treated them like they were anything else. But he like went up to the girl and was like, yeah, how's your father doing? And like knew her father and like was able to go into that, and that like was a great showcase of his character, in my opinion. But he basically
kind of explains that in the first episode, because they asked him like, oh, why do you have such an affinity towards, you know, these creatures? And he says, well, I served with them. I've served side by side with them in the war,
the Berg,
and I hate the way that the Berg is treating them.
Absolutely.
I think there's much more to it than that, but I think that's how he politically explains it to, you know, the not necessarily higher society, but to, you know, the normies.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
In this case.
To those like Unseelie Jack, who is causing all of these weird murders that are going on. I thought it was really interesting the way that they introduced that character, because like showing a victim of one of his crimes. I mean, it's general like procedural kind of show, but like it was so empathetic. I really felt for the Puck that was injured in that situation, because she was just, it was so obvious that she was just a sweet old lady that was just minding her own business. And then like, man, and this show is graphic.
Oh my gosh.
So graphic.
I want to get into more of that in episode 2 where we expand, so save that for episode 2.
Yeah.
But yes, and I mean Amazon Prime, they are like, we're going to do all
they're doing whatever they want to. They're copying HBO kind of in that sense, in my opinion, but I don't know. I just the showing her injuries up front and showing how much she was affected by it, and then showing his emotional feeling towards it allowed me to see him as a brooding character, but also feel very empathetic towards him. And I liked that. I liked the whole situation surrounding him trying to find this out, rather than being like a bad, edgy cop. He was like, look, I really care about you guys, and I just want to find this killer. Please help me out. I'm sorry that you're going to have to relive this whole big murder, or I guess it wasn't a murder, it was an attack in this case. But please just
help him out.
Yeah.
And, you know, when he even visits Tourmaline, she basically puts it so well. It's like, oh, we don't trust you because you're not going to help us, which brings me to want to talk about, kind of in one bubble, both the politics and the society of Carnival Row. So let's go into the politics side for a minute. We're introduced to, you know, very much like today, we have the two sides. Yeah. We have the Longerbanes of the world who don't want creatures in the Burg to begin with, and then we have the Breakspear side, who, you know, he's not necessarily sympathetic towards them, but he is more understanding of like, hey, you know what, they were part of our war, so that's why they're here. This is how I'm going to explain it.
Yeah, and I remember that screen of it was Bane pointing at him and being like, we should have won that war. We should have won that war. And it was so interesting to me to see this kind of like parliament back and forth, while also kind of being like a Congress kind of thing, going back and forth with this, because like the bipartisanship that they try to introduce in this, I mean, they're obviously making a lot of throws to references to current situations. To current society, but I also found that interesting that they don't really make him very empathetic towards all of the folk. They just kind of make him like, look, they were with us, they might as well stay with us, and we can't like throw them on the street or continue to let them die. Whereas the other one's just like, nah, let them die, I don't care. I don't know. It was the way that they kind of introduced the politics into this really also got me invested into it. I didn't find myself being like backing off of it, of being like, yeah, this is obviously unimportant. Like, this is their society. Their society is groups of people, groups of men and women, specifically humans, that are kind of like neutral and passive towards everything that are happening to the folk. And then there are just the ones that just want them to be dead or gone. They don't care. They're like the remnants of what was the original army, what was the pact. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on it? How do you feel about the whole like introduction to the bipartisanship generally?
I thought it was a good introduction to give us kind of how severe the, you know, kind of discrimination is with the Critch folk. I don't even want to say Critch folk,
okay.
But that's how they're saying it.
But
it was a really good insight into just kind of how severe both sides were, or even the fact that, you know, like you were saying, Breakspear's like, they were with us and they're going to stay with us. Yeah. And they haven't necessarily enforced laws of like, oh, you can't own this or you can't do that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because although Breakspear is more of the neutral side, he still very much fears scandal.
Absolutely.
And this is where we get to his son, Jonah.
Oh, Jonah. Oh, you troublemaker, you.
You troublemaker. Why? But, you know, he's... I don't know if... First instinct of Jonah, do you think, you know, he is using the Fae for sport, or do you think he's like, these people are fine, this is how I'll spend my time kind of thing?
I think his wealthiness and his place in politics allows him to be able to, like, not care either way.
It's interesting that you say that, though, because in other people's eyes, he should care. He needs to probably keep that clean, professional,
Absolutely.
like
With his mom.
with his mom, with that appearance of like, I'm the chancellor's son. I can't afford scandal. I can't be, going to brothels and then be getting kidnapped after, some sexy fun times.
Yeah, yeah. It was so. His relationship with his dad was really intriguing to me, and I think that'll probably progress a lot during the coming season, because I think his dad almost is the reason why he's acting the way he is. His dad's like passive to him. His dad just kind of like is using him almost as political leverage, it looks like, and so he doesn't see himself as needing to be as much of a son as his dad wants him to be, or his mom wants him to be, really. So we see him just go off and do whatever he wants, and I like almost don't blame him.
I don't blame him either, because he's not a son. He's an object to be trained to succeed his father when the right time comes.
Poor kid.
So yeah, of course he's gonna go out and venture and kind of do whatever he wants and not care about how society views him, because the people who should matter to view him don't really view him as anything.
Absolutely.
So no, 100%. Let's kind of dive into the society and high society of Carnival Row, and this is where we're introduced to the Spurn Roses.
Oh, the Spurn Roses.
Oh, cuckoo bananas, these two.
Oh my God, they are so fun in their own right, in my opinion. I love to hate them. I love to hate the two of these guys, because like immediately off the bat you were just introduced to their like snobbery. You can feel just the money oozing off of them, and the desperation in the eyes of the brother, the desperation in the eyes of Ezra Spurn Rose when he finds out his ship got sank. You could see all of the disappointment of his parents just lay on his shoulders
like
immediately.
you made a very poor investment choice, and probably the fact that investment choice even remotely had anything to do with Fae folk.
Absolutely.
I agree with you, the disappointment. And then Imogen, she's an interesting one, because I believe it's in this episode. She seems like, she's desperate to try and like be in the position her brother is. She's like, I'm 23, but I have no like suitors, or I'm not gonna be married, or something like that. So you could tell she probably wants more respect in her society.
You can also see kind of later on in the episode, there's this one particular shot that really caught me. It was she was looking at the bird in the cage, and she like stands up, and then she's like in the cage as soon as the wealthy puck, I'm trying to remember his
Mr. Agreus.
Yeah, Mr. Agreus comes up, and you can just see that she's so trapped in this situation of her own mindset, and like kind of being at the mercy of her brother. Even though they like have a good kind of weird romantic relationship introduced in there. Do you remember that when they first walk up, they're like arm in arm, and she like leans over and kisses his cheek? I was like,
I think that's just like how paternal or like brotherly relationships were supposed to be. But the introduction with Mr. Agreus, they clearly don't see a puck needing to be in high society, and he actually, this kind of storyline really comes into full effect in the next episode. So we'll put a pin in that for right now. Because right now I want to go into some news and gossip.
Absolutely. So everybody, welcome to the news row for news and gossip.
AfterBuzz TV News.
So we have a little bit of news on the actual like creation of the show. We recently got an article from CBS News from Orlando Bloom's interview with CBS talking about how the show is a commentary on the refugee crisis. And I mean, it's pretty obvious once you look into the show. You can see kind of this big army of humans came over to a land and tried to steal all of its wealth and drive its people out. So now you have all of its people going back to the human lands. And he claims very shortly that he found it really interesting to have something that was commenting a little bit on what's going on in the world, and that he read the script and felt like this was like, even though it was fantasy, it was really empathetic, and it was investigating the murders, but it was also looking at the fairies as representatives of the migrants and refugees of that world. So CBS doesn't really go on to talk about it a lot, but we could definitely delve into that a little more. And that's really all the news and gossip for right now. Oh, wait, there's one more piece. We already have a confirmed season 2.
What?
Whoa! Season 2 already. We're only on episode 1. Thank you for the soundbite. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, hopefully they introduce more, mythical creatures in the next season. But for right now, could you maybe take us down Mythical Row and tell us about one in particular today?
Absolutely. Everybody, welcome to Mythical Row. Today, I'm going to take you through brief histories of fairies and mind flayers. And mind flayers, kind of introduction at the very end of the episode, but it's very important to kind of know the history of them going on. So first of all, I do want to say that fairies, the history and like origination of fairies, there are so many origination stories. They are involved in almost every kind of lore that you can find, from Catholic to Gaelic to Celtic to go to Norse. You can find them in the King James demonology. You can find them even in Shakespeare, obviously, with Midsummer's Night Dream. So just to start on them, fairies generally are known in history as creatures with human appearances that have magical powers ranging in size from the size of a tiny, like 2 inches to the size of a human child, but descriptions vary wildly. But anyway, continuing forward, they were found kind of in Christian lore later in the demonology, and talk about like they possibly are like demoted angels rather than fallen angels, but we'll get more into fairies on next episode. So the next subject that I want to bring up specifically are the Cthulhu-like mind flayers, also known as illithids, that were kind of introduced in Dungeons and Dragons and also known popularly in the H.P. Lovecraft lore. These are kind of creatures with octopus-looking heads that are normally seen as like these creatures that are very strong with psionic magic, which are very like focused in mind magics, which is very different from what we end up seeing this creature do at the end of the episode. I find it really interesting to see where this creature ends up going, because honestly, it is going a totally different route than the normal D&D mind flayers, which are seen as these like robed magic users. This is a big hulking beast with claws that'll tear out people's guts. But yeah, that's it for Mythical Row. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Vito, and I would love to expand on the Cthulhu kind of mind flayer stuff,
Absolutely.
but in the next episode, because we are getting ready to do that. Thank you so much for joining us here for the very first episode of the Carnival Row After Show. Vito, where can the fans find you on social media?
You can find me anywhere at VScutty, S-C-U-T-T-I. That's V-S-C-U-T-T-I on Instagram and Twitter.
You can find me, Veronica Valencia, on Twitter and Instagram at It's Me, Veronica_V. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, and be sure to stay tuned for the second episode right after this.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.